Hello, everyone, and welcome to this deep dive into the United Kingdom's economic landscape. Over the past few years, the UK has faced overlapping challenges that have culminated in historically high debt levels, steep taxation, sluggish productivity, and a cost of living crisis that shows little sign of relenting. Despite being one of the world's largest economies, Britain's current position is precarious, so precarious that many citizens and businesses alike are questioning whether the country is heading for long-term stagnation or if there is still a path to renewed growth. In this narration, we will explore how the UK got into its current predicament, why taxes are so high yet never seem to fill the public coffers enough, how living standards are declining, and what can be done to bring about the economic recovery so many are hoping for. Looking back over the last 15 years, the UK has encountered a chain of major shocks. First came the 2008 financial crisis, where enormous sums of public money were funneled into bailing out financial institutions. That initial debt spike would have far-reaching consequences. In the aftermath, austerity measures were introduced, reducing public spending rather than increasing wages, investing in social programs, or stimulating productivity. Critics say this contributed to a lost decade of growth for regular households, and the statistics on productivity bear this out. A long-time trend of increasing efficiency in the UK workforce essentially stalled after 2008, reversing decades of steady gains. Then came political uncertainties that reduced investment, and more recently, the global health crisis and an acute energy shortage. These factors all arrived without fully addressing the problems that came before them, which is why Britain finds itself in such a tight spot now. One of the most startling revelations for many is how high the effective tax rate can be for the average worker. The UK has multiple layers of taxation: income tax, separate types of national insurance contributions, and council tax, on top of indirect taxes like VAT. While this patchwork of taxes is often presented in separate line items, all the revenue ends up in the same governmental pot. Some argue that splitting them out only obscures how large the overall burden truly is. An even bigger problem arises with employer national insurance, because for any business, the full cost of hiring an employee includes both salary and mandatory contributions. If these go up significantly, employers often respond by raising prices, letting staff go, or holding wages down. These moves feed back into the broader economy, stoking inflation, reducing disposable income, or lowering consumer confidence. It is also worth noting that once council tax is factored in, plus other fees, many households end up losing well over 40 or 50% of their paycheck to taxes and related expenses. For graduates who repay student loans, that figure can climb even higher. Taxes, however, are not the only source of strain for British households. Real household income, what remains once inflation is considered, has been stagnant or in decline. Housing costs are extraordinarily high, among the highest in the developed world, making it difficult for new buyers and renters alike. Meanwhile, everyday goods and services have become noticeably more expensive, partly because of supply chain disruptions and partly because of the recent surge in energy costs. Taken together, these pressures create the sense that no matter how much people work, they are barely treading water. On the government side, the challenges are no less daunting. Successive crises led to a lot of borrowing, first during the global health emergency to support businesses and citizens, then again during the energy crisis to help households cope with skyrocketing bills. Though necessary in the short term to stave off deeper calamities, this added weight to the already massive national debt. Because much of it was borrowed when interest rates were extremely low, it initially seemed more affordable. But as inflation shot up, central banks raised interest rates sharply, and the cost of servicing the debt spiked from around £40 billion annually to close to £100 billion in just a few years. That jump of roughly £60 billion is huge. It is comparable to the entire defense budget, and it means a lot less is left over for things like healthcare, policing, education, or investments in productivity. If there is one area many economists say the UK needs to address, it is productivity. In simple terms, productivity measures how much economic value each worker can generate per hour. If productivity goes up, wages can rise without sparking inflation, and the government's tax receipts can climb without raising tax rates. The UK, however, has struggled mightily in this department since about 2008. Some point to underinvestment by businesses, which may have been hesitant to spend on new technologies or equipment in an uncertain political and economic environment. Others highlight the lack of sufficiently robust skills training or education reforms needed for an evolving marketplace. Political uncertainty and repeated shocks can also deter foreign investors who might look elsewhere for more stable conditions. Without a concerted push toward improving efficiency through technology, smart infrastructure, and skills development, the UK remains locked in a loop of slow growth, high taxes, and constrained wages. The UK workforce itself is another key issue. While many advanced economies saw a rebound in workforce participation once pandemic restrictions eased, Britain has struggled to recapture its pre-crisis labor force levels. A notable segment of the population is effectively missing from employment stats. Some people left the job market due to illness and are stuck on long waiting lists for treatments, while others opted for early retirement in their 50s and 60s, and a fair number of working-age adults had to exit the workforce to care for children or elderly relatives. This smaller workforce means fewer taxpayers and fewer people to keep businesses running efficiently. Employers facing labor shortages try to attract workers by raising salaries, but if their own costs have also risen because of taxes and energy bills, they might have no choice but to charge more for their products or cut back on hiring. These pressures feed an inflationary cycle that puts further strain on households. Another dimension to Britain's predicament is the discrepancy between London and the rest of the country. The capital city and its surrounding region generate a disproportionately large share of national output. London's GDP alone dwarfs that of entire nations, but many other areas are struggling, with lower wages and fewer job opportunities. Efforts to rebalance the economy outside London have been mixed, and the gap remains a major source of tension for policymakers and the public. If London's economic power were theoretically removed from the UK's overall performance, living standards in many other regions might look comparatively low by international standards. This regional inequality exacerbates social issues and can spark political friction. Thus, the UK is confronted with a monumental economic puzzle: how to manage a huge debt load without further raising taxes or borrowing, while also trying to revive public services that are under immense strain. With so much of the budget consumed by the interest on national debt, there is limited capacity for new public spending. Yet vital services like healthcare, local government, and the justice system are already at a breaking point. Many facilities have been closed or are operating with skeleton staff, and waiting lists, especially in healthcare, have hit record levels. So, what can be done about it? Most experts advocate for a multi-pronged approach. First, boosting productivity is critical. This includes better infrastructure, improved training and education programs, and incentives for businesses to adopt modern technologies or practices that could increase efficiency. Second, re-engaging the missing workforce is also essential. Faster access to medical care for those in long-term sickness, as well as flexible programs for older workers and caregivers, could help expand the labor pool and raise overall economic output. Third, tackling wasteful government spending might free up resources and restore some trust with taxpayers who are already paying large shares of their income to the state. Fourth, targeted investments in high-potential areas such as green energy, advanced manufacturing, and digital services could spur longer-term growth and job creation. The path ahead is uncertain, shaped by how policymakers and voters choose to address the hurdles of high taxes, unaffordable living costs, regional disparities, and an aging or absent workforce. Even so, it is precisely in these moments of deep crisis that structural adjustments, technological leaps, and new economic strategies often come to fruition. If a bold and comprehensive set of policies can be implemented, the UK might emerge more resilient, competitive, and equitable in the long run. Failure to act, however, risks entrenching the stagnation that so many are already feeling, leaving future generations to pay an even heavier price. Thank you for listening to this exploration of Britain's current economic challenges. It is a complex story of compounding crises, difficult policy choices, and a search for renewed vitality. While the outlook can seem daunting, history has shown that a nation's fortunes can turn around with the right combination of courage, creativity, and collaboration. The coming months and years will be pivotal, and it will be up to leaders and citizens alike to decide whether the UK continues on its present course or finds a way to build a brighter, more prosperous future.